there, I'm Lara with Game Nerds here for another board game breakdown, and Spencer is here to tell us about the White Castle from DeVere Games.
The White Castle, not just a White Castle, the White Castle that is actually a follow-up, if you weren't aware, to the very popular The Red Cathedral, also from DeVere, also from the same design team.
Right.
Who is, I have to look this up, Shay S. and Isra C.
Yes. We hope we're pronouncing those correctly.
Yes. So I was very interested just to see how this compared to the original,
right.
What kind of, if there are any similarities there are. And so throughout this video, we're going to break this game down and give you everything that you need to know in order to make an informed purchasing decision about the game, if it's for you or not, or whoever you might be buying it for. So I say that's a great place to get started.
Okay, great. Well, just the initial look of it is so incredibly different from Red Cathedral.
Correct.
I mean, there are some elements there that we've seen before, but they're being used in a new way. Can you talk to us about that?
Sure, absolutely. So just to set the scene for what's going on in the game, it's a very different time frame, a different location. This is Japan, not Russia, 18th century Japan, and this takes place in the what is called the Himeji Castle.
Okay.
And it is the titular White Castle. And so what's happening is players are controlling various clans, and the clans are represented by the different colors. This can be played from 1 to 4 players.
All right.
And so we have blue, red, green, and not pictured is yellow.
Okay.
And so these clans are competing to get points, and the way they do that is they're going to tend the gardens, they're going to defend the castle, and also progress up the social ladder of nobility. So there are a couple of things going on here that you would imagine would happen during this era. And basically all of those things, the way you show progress towards each of those categories is by gaining points or unlocking things, that kind of thing.
Right, so it's kind of a, would you say a point salad kind of thing going on here?
There's a little bit of that because there are several different ways to gain points, as that's what a point salad is. But the main mechanism in this game, and we can go ahead and transition into that from the overview, is dice. Just various forms of dice drafting, dice placement.
Which was a main thing in Red Cathedral.
Exactly. And so because the Red Cathedral was so popular, they almost immediately greenlit a sequel.
Wow.
And so I was reading the designer diary for this game, and the designer said that they really wanted to, what people really loved about the Red Cathedral was the cool dice drafting mechanism built into the rondelle, and using that to choose your actions and that kind of thing. And so they still wanted to make dice the central focus of the game, but some kind of cool dice mechanism.
Yeah, a new, different way to
Correct.
do that.
Correct. And so in this game, what we have is the addition or the inclusion of these bridges here. And you can play with or without the cardboard bridges because it's also pictured on the board itself. Yeah, exactly. So, but I mean, why wouldn't you play with the cool 3D bridges?
Well, and just even the fact that you get to put them together is fun.
It is fun. I mean, I love putting stuff together, so I enjoy doing that for this game. So what's going to happen is, over 3 rounds, everybody's going to take 3 actions on their turn. And so a turn will be, I'm going to draft a die from one of these bridges. Okay, you can only ever choose a die from the outsides of the bridge.
Right.
And they're always in increasing value. And so you can choose one that's pretty high or one that's pretty low. And there are trade-offs for each, and there are reasons why you would take one from the other side, but you can never take from the middle. And you'll take that die and put it somewhere else, either on the board, inside the castle, outside the castle, or on your own player board down here. There are actions that you can do. And you're going to place that die based on its value and color. Those are criteria that you're going to look for when you're placing the die. One thing that is interesting is, let's say you take a 5 and you put it down on a 3. You get the difference in coins. If you are lower than that, let's say you have the 1 and you put it on the 3, then you have to pay the difference in coins. So you can pretty much always use these dice, but you're either going to get something or have to pay something, or if they're the same value, you don't do anything.
Break even.
Exactly. The colors matter anywhere you see that color, and from what I'm seeing, I'm pretty sure it's just on the player boards themselves. You can see, okay, here you have to play an orange die. You can't play any of those.
Right, well, so it matters when it's placing the dice there.
Correct.
where it comes into play up here in the castle is which action you want to perform.
Yes, that's correct.
You have to match that color of die.
You're right, yeah. So exactly, and that's going to go into your decisions of which die to place, because if there are multiple of that color, you can do both of those actions, which is how you optimize your turn. And speaking of that, you would think that the turns can go pretty short, very, very quickly, because all you're doing is you're taking a die and you're putting it down and doing the actions. But the way the game unfolds, it's very easy to have some kind of chain going on. So this thing does this, and then that lets you execute another action, which might let you execute another action.
Yes.
And so if you like that kind of thing in a game, if you like upgrades and feeling the feeling of satisfaction when you could do multiple things through one simple action, which in this case is just putting a die down, you're really going to like how that is executed in the White Castle for sure.
All right, so we've established that there are the 3 places on the board, 3 kinds of zones.
Right.
We've got the gardens, we've got outside of the castle kind of defending, and then we've got inside the castle trying to work up the social ladder. Can you talk to us more about each of those kinds of, they're not factions, are they?
No, they're just the various areas and how you might break up your clan, essentially. You're going to have the different areas, and that's what's going on your player board down here. You've got meeples of each different class. I don't know if it's class, but you've got your courtiers are on the top row, the farmers are on the middle row, and then the warriors are on the bottom row. And whenever you do the particular action associated with that location, which in this case, this is the garden action.
So it looks like a bridge.
Right. The next one is this little, let's see, where is it? This little action that looks like the castle is whenever you send the courtiers to the castle. And then finally there's a flag over here, which is also here. And that's where you're sending them up. Essentially, you're training the warriors. And so whenever you're doing those actions, you'll remove one of these workers here. And as you put them out, they're going to give you more points, but then it's also going to upgrade this track here. So anytime you've ever seen any kind of mechanism where you put stuff out, but it also reveals bonuses or benefits, that's what's going on here. The more of your workers that you get out, the more powerful these actions are going to be down here. And so as you send them out, they're going to the various locations. So like I said, your warriors are going to come out here. Your farmers are going to go on either side of the bridge, which, without getting too much into it, are going to have different kinds of actions, which, as I said, can change. So if I go here, I can do, if I pay, another bridge action or another garden action. If I come down here, I could do a courtier action, or a castle action. And so by doing one action, you can continue to do multiple ones.
Right, and you mentioned about like putting the warriors out there gains you points. That's actually at the end of the game, right?
Right. Now, that's one of the things that I noticed is there's not a lot of instant point gaining.
A lot of them. There are a couple, but
right.
Yeah.
So anytime you see, let me see if I can find one of those symbols. Anytime you see a symbol with a fan, so as you can see, there's not a whole lot there initially. And so a lot of the planning needs to go into the end game, what you're going to get with those points, because there's just not a common place to go where you'll always be able to gain points. Now, certain things will happen throughout the game where these cards will swap out, so it's not stale. They're constantly cycling through as long as people go up here and do these actions. These stay the same, so they're not as frequent, but there is so much variety here that some people might start to get a little bit overwhelmed if they tend to, when they play a game, oh, I don't know what to do. There's so many actions, so many different ways to go.
There's a lot.
I'm just not sure what to do. So you're putting the dice out there to do the various things, but it's going to probably feel like a very quick game, because essentially what's happening is everybody has opportunity to place a die down 3 times in a round, and there are 3 rounds in the game, as indicated by this wooden fish token. And so that's not a whole lot of time to do all those actions, but as I said earlier, if you can really take advantage of that chaining and how you're clever with your dice placement, with their values and doing multiple things, it makes me think of any kind of game that has some kind of dice placement, dice as workers mechanism, and you like that kind of thing, you're probably going to like this one too. And so I'm thinking of like Tekenu, or a lot of the T games, Tekenu, Toledum, those are going to be very similar to this, or at least that type of feeling whenever you play this game. As well as Lorenzo Il Magnifico. It's a very popular game. People like it because of the manipulation of the dice and how they use them most efficiently in the game. So if you're fans of those games, you're probably going to like this one as well.
Great. So we've talked about what kinds of aspects this game is. It's lots of choices. It's dice drafting and manipulation. So who exactly is the target audience for this?
Well, first thing I want to cover is the game is for 1 to 4 players.
Okay.
It does have a solo mode, so you're not out of the audience if you typically play by yourself.
Okay.
So there's the solo mode is like you're playing against an automated player through the deck of cards. So solo gamers might enjoy this. If you like European style games, this has a lot of the hallmarks of that, the resource management, that kind of thing. And worker placement, but workers as dice, that kind of thing. As far as complexity goes, I think that once you get into it and you understand what you're doing, it's not a complex game. Like the concepts are, I think most people will be able to understand. It's just the understanding of how one thing impacts the other and really being able to, manipulate that whole system.
Exactly.
So if you like that kind of thing, of figuring out a game and using it, doing your best to manipulate that system, then this for sure you'll like that. The box on the game says it's ages 12 and up. I mean, I don't disagree with that. I think that that's a fair age to be playing this. I don't think there's any head-to-head competitiveness. There is some player interaction for sure,
right? Because
you're drafting the dice, so you're already going to be potentially taking something that somebody wants.
I would say that the player interaction on this seems about the same as like with Red Cathedral, of it wasn't just really onslaught, I'm cutthroat going after you. It was just a whoops, I got in here before you did with placing this card here. And it can happen here too with I placed this dice here first, and now so like in a 2-player game, now you can't place a dice here anymore.
Right.
Or when you get to those higher player counts, you have to start stacking and you might have to pay them some money in order to put your die there.
Yeah, stacking dice is putting dice on top of one another happens once you get to a 3 or 4 player game. So that's an interesting thing, and how that impacts the player count, or how the player count impacts that. And it's like you said, you're doing things primarily for your benefit, but there might be a little bit of, okay, this might make things worse for that person. So you'll hear the term multiplayer solitaire with a lot of European style games, but this is not that.
No.
Like, definitely what you do completely impacts.
Impact other people. Whether it's the dice placement, or when you put a courtier in a certain room of the castle, so you remove a card there and replace it. Somebody was planning to go use that card and now they can't anymore because it's gone.
Right. But as far as like direct competition, like in your face, you don't have to worry about that with this game. The other thing is, like I said, it's solving the puzzle of how to make the best with what you have. So it's not super complex. You don't have to be in like a state of quietness and focus in on what's happening. Traditional game night, I think, is fine.
Maybe a little more casual.
Yeah, for sure.
Very good. Well, speaking of that casual game, trying to work it into a game night, a big factor with working it into game night is how much time does it take to play this game? Setup, rules explanation, gameplay, and teardown. Do you have that information for us? I
do, and the interesting thing is, for a game like this, you might expect it to be longer. Typically, Euro games are longer. This one is not going to be a 2-hour plus game. And we hinted at, or talked about several times, how short the game can feel because of the rounds. And so there is going to be a lot of, to a varying degree, it's all going to be dependent on how much players want to think about what they're doing. Like, if you really don't take the time to inspect how what you're going to do may impact future turns, you could get through this really quickly. Our first game, when we weren't understanding what we were doing, granted it was 2 players, but we played it in probably 20 minutes.
Yes, I would agree.
Which is kind of silly. But the box says 80 minutes. And after that first game, I was like, what?
There's no way.
Right. But after doing some timing and some thinking, so it's about 7 to 10 minutes to set up based on how well you're familiar with it and how many people you have to help you. Then it's about 8 minutes to explain the game, especially if you're an expert, you know what you're talking about. And then about 1 to 2 minutes, would you say, for a player turn?
I agree with that, because we are talking about trying to chain as many things together as possible. Really, though, you're kind of limited on on what you can chain together. So it's not like an infinite number of things that you can chain together. So it won't take that long. So I don't think there's, I don't know if I can say never about chances for AP on this. But,
Yeah, like what we've talked about, there's a lot to choose from. And so even if you know what you're doing on your turn, if you're paying attention, you can execute it probably in 30 seconds. But sometimes if you get to a step and then you think about what that step's going to do, then that's going to add to your time. So again, it all depends on your familiarity with the game and how much time you want to devote to taking your turn. So 1 to 2 minutes is a very short way of saying that.
Right.
Yeah, then it's also going to depend on how many people are playing. But I would say like for a 2-player game, after all of that, you may be looking at 30 to 40 minutes. And then by the time all is said and done, playing the game, learning it, all of that, putting it away, even for a 4-player game, I don't think you're looking at any more than an hour and a half. 80 minutes is actually, I mean, that's a very specific number. Normally you don't see something like you'll see 30 minutes, 60 minutes, whatever. 80 minutes, that's probably pretty close for a 4-player game.
Right.
Of course, the fewer people, the shorter it's going to be.
Good. I'm glad that you specified that, because that might be a really important point that people are going to take into consideration when they're thinking about buying this game. So there's that.
Yes, there is.
All right, so I think we've covered everything. Let's just get a really quick, little minute recap on
I'll do my best.
Okay.
Okay, so fans of the Red Cathedral, I'm sure will enjoy this as well. It's very different, but still has that cool, unique central dice mechanism going on in the game that the whole game revolves around. And if you like any kind of dice placement games, you're going to like this as well. However, if you are prone to like overthinking, feeling like you just don't know what to do because there's so many choices, going to be an issue for you here. But otherwise, I think it appeals to quite a wide audience, at least for fans of dice games and European-style games.
Well, thank you for that summary, and if all of this has interested you, the best place to find this game would be at GameNerds.com. Well, thank you so much for joining us for this board game breakdown. If you like this video, please give us a like and subscribe to the channel so you can see more board game breakdowns as they come out.
Yeah, and if you have any questions about the White Castle or the Red Cathedral, or hey, what do you think will be the next game in this series, or what you want it to be, leave it down in the comments below and we'll respond to you whenever we can.
Once again, I'm Lara.
And I am Spencer.
Thanks so much for joining us.